Aloha and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in this virtual Bodhi Day service here at Hawaii Betsuin. Please join me in Gaksho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. When Rimban Hagio asked me to give today's talk, I had no idea how serendipitous this would be. I say that because it was 11 years ago in 2010 that my husband Barry gave the Bodhi Day talk on this very same date, December 12th. To me, this feels like a profound coincidence, especially since Barry is no longer with us. Excuse me. Might this be due to karmic circumstances and events in both our lives? Bodhi Day is a time for reflection, for awareness, to think about how the Buddha's teachings can help each of us weather the challenges during this difficult time of COVID. Siddhartha Gautama awoke to enlightenment while sitting under the Bodhi tree. At the age of 35, he attained Buddhahood, reaching this state of enlightenment through intense meditation. Barry's talk captures the spirit of Bodhi Day because we are all on a journey to awaken to the Buddha's teachings. I'd like to share what he said in his talk at that time. And so that he can join us, I brought his photo. So keep in mind that as I speak, it's Barry speaking. There's a story behind my being here today. It begins with a conversation I had with Reverend Motoyoshi about a month ago. Reverend Muneto asked me to serve as a facilitator for the annual in-service ministerial training at the Buddha Study Center. Reverend Motoyoshi and I were paired up together and to learn something about each other. And we had to do this within 5 minutes. You probably didn't know, but is what Reverend Motoyoshi introduced me and said, everyone knew my wife, Barbara Brennan, but probably hadn't met me. You probably didn't know that Barry was born in Minnesota and was brought up a Catholic, but became a Buddhist after reading Everyday Suchness by Gyome Kubose and Buddhism for the West by Dorothy Donath. Well, Barry said there's probably more to it than that, but 2 minutes to explain why you changed your religious beliefs isn't much time. There were other influential books, many engaging sermons by Bishop Yoshiaki Fujitani, and very importantly, my father's approval to consider other religious beliefs. Then it was Reverend Motoyoshi's turn to tell me a little bit about herself. I remember 2 things stood out. First, I found out she went to school at the University of Wisconsin and enjoyed the winters. She also told me that she never vacuumed underneath the sofa or her bed because, as a good Buddhist, she had no attachments. I wasn't sure if she was joking or not, but I think she has a good sense of humor. During one of the breaks, she asked me if I would speak at today's Bodhi Day service. Why me, I asked. What would I talk about? Well, for me, becoming a Buddhist was not linear. Many events and experiences had come together. There was no single profound moment of, I get it. So maybe it's just better to explain why Buddhism appealed to me. Minnesota, like Wisconsin, has some really long, cold winters. When I was growing up, my 2 sisters and I spent a lot of time doing picture puzzles, 100 pieces, 200 pieces, even 500 pieces. They were big puzzles. The winters were really long. I also like to help my dad put together small appliances like gas ranges, bicycles, and other items he sold in his hardware store. Between the puzzles and the hardware store, I developed a curiosity about lots of things. How do things fit together? How do they work? In high school, I found I really liked science, although science didn't always like me. I majored in zoology at Arizona State University and then did my master's and PhD at the University of Hawaii in entomology, the study of insects. Two historical figures shaped my religious beliefs. As I explained earlier, I was brought up Catholic, and up until my mid-20s, my beliefs were influenced by the teachings of Jesus. My father and two brothers were Catholics, and my mother and two sisters were Lutherans. On Sundays, all the men went to the Catholic Church, and all the women went to the Lutheran Church. We were very tolerant of differences in beliefs. By my mid-30s, my beliefs were shaped by Buddhism, a process that I will explain in a moment. Both Jesus and Siddhartha Gautama spent years searching for the truth. When Siddhartha became enlightened, he became known as Shakyamuni Buddha. Today, Bodhi Day, we celebrate his enlightenment. For most of us, perhaps enlightenment comes in little stages, the aha or eureka moments when we discover some truth about ourselves or the world in which we live. I think most of us are content to experience these mini Bodhi moments. My scientific curiosity carried over to religion at the age of 27. I wrote to my dad to tell him that I found it difficult to accept everything the Catholic Church wanted me to accept simply on faith. Accepting things on faith was contradictory to my training as a scientist. Things had to make sense to me, and too many things about the Catholic religion didn't. For example, the Church's stand on divorce, celibacy for the priest, the role of women in the Church, the infallibility of the Pope, and abortion. They all had to be accepted on the basis of faith. The first challenge to my Catholic faith came when I met Barbara. We were both in high school when we started dating. Yes, that was a long time ago. I found out she was Buddhist, and Buddhists didn't believe in God, or at least God as defined by the Catholic Church. I made an appointment with the local priest to find out how I could prove to her beyond a reasonable doubt that God existed. To my surprise, he told me that it was an article of faith that God existed. That is, there was no scientific proof that he or she existed. During the 70s, I spent a lot of time thinking about what did and what didn't make sense. I read books by the Behringer brothers, two priests that became anti-war activists, books by Baba Ram Dass, who wrote Be Here Now, Carlos Castaneda, A Separate Reality, The Teachings of Don Juan, and Elaine Pagels, who wrote the Gnostic Gospels, I also read a book of poetry by the Reverend James Kavanaugh. He wrote, "There are men too gentle to live among wolves." Reverend Kavanaugh challenged the church to do something about people who were suffering from hunger, disease, war, and old age. What should the church be doing? He described himself as a seeker, and he said he was but one of millions of seekers. By then, I knew I was also a seeker. When I was about 35, I had an awakening of sorts, maybe one of those eureka moments. Frankly, I don't remember exactly what it was about, but I'm sure it was very profound at the time. I rushed to tell Barbara about this great, profound truth. She was standing at the top of the stairs and seemed totally unimpressed with my eureka moment and simply said, "That's so obvious. I replied, if that's so obvious, why didn't you tell me you already knew about this profound truth? To which she said, you didn't ask. You could have read all that in this book. And she handed me a copy of Everyday Suchness by the Reverend Gyome Kubose. Reverend Kubose was born in San Francisco and was sent to Japan for his primary and secondary education. He returned to California, graduating from UC Berkeley with a major in philosophy. During most of World War II, he was in the Heart Mountain relocation camp. However, in 1944, he relocated to Chicago and founded the Chicago Buddhist Temple. Everyday Suchness consisted of short articles that appeared in his weekly bulletin. William Gilbert, then president of the American Buddhist Association, encouraged him to collect the articles and publish them in a book to be shared with others. In his introduction to Everyday Suchness, Reverend Kubose states that the greatest truths have always been the most simple. By the way, that's also true about solutions to scientific problems. I knew I was going to like this book. The first chapter was about the relationship between happiness and work. Kubose wrote that the real enjoyment of work was the working itself rather than the result of the work. Wow, I thought, Kubose was validating my life as both a religious seeker and a scientist. It's the journey, not the end, that gives us happiness. As a scientist, I could relate to that. Science is fun. Reverend Kubose's description of Buddhism was brief, clear, and very appealing. He described Buddhism as a religion of enlightenment and awareness and a way of life. It is not a religion of belief like Catholicism, and therefore had no dogma to believe or creed to follow. Kubose wrote that Buddhism teaches us to see and understand life and things as they are. When my children were very young, less than 2, Barb and I subscribed to a monthly newsletter called Growing Child. I remember one newsletter was about ultimate responsibility, advising us to accept responsibility for our lives and our actions. Life was a little stressful then, and we seemed to blame each other for all the stress in our lives. The article might just as well have been titled Buddhism, a Way of Life. The article might, life can be hard sometimes. The newsletter didn't suggest we pray to a supernatural being to deliver us from our problems. Actually, taking responsibility for my own problems appealed to me. I think that's something my parents used to emphasize. I know they never suggested praying to God. Finally, Reverend Kubose emphasized the need to live a life of gratitude, the Nembutsu. As we all know, that's easier said than done. I'm inclined to think that our sense of gratitude grows as we age. Each year, as I look back, there seems to be more to be grateful for, especially family and friends. Buddhism, at least as I understand it, appeals to me because it doesn't rely on creeds or doctrine. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path are logical. Buddhism, as I understand it, also overlooks your faults and accepts you just as you are. It reminds us to be grateful, and I certainly have much to be grateful for. I admit I don't understand everything about Buddhism or Jodo Shinshu. Enlightenment still eludes me, and as Kubose said, it's the journey, not the end. Bodhi Day reminds us that enlightenment is worth the journey. Buddhism is like science. It challenges us to seek the truth of life's reality. Barb didn't try to convert me to Buddhism, although she often asked if I wanted to go to Sunday service at the temple. I'd usually check the Saturday Advertiser to see who was speaking. If it was Bishop Fujitani, I'd usually go. He gave Barb a copy of Everyday Suchness, suggesting that it might be a good book for both of us. Anyway, I really enjoyed Reverend Fujitani's sermons. They were intelligent, interesting, and thought-provoking. I think one of his sermons was about awakening the Buddha within, which brings me back to my meeting with Reverend Motoyoshi. At the Buddha Study Center, she told me a story. I don't know if it's true, but I think it's pretty funny. She said she went to the Pizza Hut in the 70s. It used to be next to the Buddha Study Center, and asked the clerk to make me one with everything. Apparently, the clerk thought she was trying to be funny and told her that only the Buddha can make her one with everything. She then explained that she wanted a pizza with everything on it. Oh, okay. After she paid for her pizza with a $10 bill, she waited for her change. When he didn't give it to her, she had to ask for it. The clerk told her that the Buddha said that change must come from within. I think that was the last time she ordered pizza there. As you can see, Barry left a legacy seeking the truth and discovering the appeal of Buddhism. He remains close in our hearts always. It has been a privilege to share his talk with you. Continue to take care in this period of COVID with all the restrictions and risks. Keep in touch with family and friends, especially our elders, and stay well. Let us recite the Nembutsu together. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you for your attention.